pre-owned vehicle inventory to choose from. Our team is ready to take you into your next vehicle today. Right now, take advantage of 0% finance.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome back. Good evening, honorable members of council, Chief of Staff Washington, Chief of Staff Walker, department heads, and members of the public. We're here this evening for Real Estate and Housing Department's budget hearing. This is one of many in a series of budget hearings in the month of April and May. But first, I would like to recognize members of the Finance Committee that are in attendance by doing a roll call. Vice Chair.
Present.
All right. A third district member.
Present.
8th district member.
Present.
Okay. At-large member. Council President. Council President Congo. All right. This time I would also like to recognize other council persons in attendance by doing a roll call. First District Council Member Gray.
Present.
Second District Council Member Darby.
Here.
5th District Council Member Fields.
Present.
6th District Council Member McCoy. At-large Council Member Cabrera.
Present.
At-large Council Member Dixon.
Present.
Thank you. At this time, I also would like to recognize the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Tang Washington, OMB Director Robert Greco, Stephanie Mergler from OMB. We also have Real Estate and Housing Director Bob Ware, and we have Ms. Marshall, Strategy Director Ms. Marshall Bassnight from City Council, and we have other panelists, as well as members of the public who are joining us this evening. Before I turn over to Ms. Mergler for a budget overview summary of real estate and housing, I would first like to inform everyone that public comments will be asked at the end of each department's hearing, and we look forward to participation from the public. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. If there are any follow-up questions that are brought up during the budget hearing, Ms. Bassnight will track and follow up on these requests. I ask that if my colleagues have questions, they simply use the raise hand feature on Zoom. And at this time, Ms. Mergler, I will turn it over to you for a financial overview of real estate and housing, proposed fiscal year 22 budget, followed then next by Director Bob Ware. He will do a question and answer with council. The floor is yours, Ms. Mergler.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. Good evening, Chairman Johnson, President Congo, and honorable members of council. Would you mind advancing the slide? Thank you. The Department of Real Estate and Housing is requesting a total general fund budget of $5.9 million. Of that amount, $2.2 million is in the administrative division, and $3.7 million is in the rehabilitation division. Overall, the general fund budget increased by about $3 million, or 101%. Personal services increased by $22,000, or 7.8%, in part because of a citywide 2% cost of living adjustment for eligible employees and mandatory step increases for classified employees. In addition, the acquisition and disposition manager position was converted to a director of development. A change in the split funding allocation of this new position, as compared to the prior position, led to an increase of $25,000 to the general fund. This increase is offset by the reallocation of funding for the split-funded program administrator position, which saved the general fund about $12,000. This reallocation was made possible by the greater allocation of home funds that can be applied to administrative costs. MS&E decreased by $193,000, or 9.7%. This is largely because the city's contribution to the Wilmington Neighborhood Conservancy Land Bank will be $500,000 less than it was in FY21. This decrease is offset by a $300,000 increase to miscellaneous projects to fund an expansion of the Neighborhood Clean Team initiative. Finally, debt service increased by about $3 million per the existing debt service schedule. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mergler. I don't see any questions at this time for OMB. And also I'd like to recognize Councilmember McCoy is in attendance with us. And I do have a question from Councilmember Fields.
Yes, thank you, everyone for being in the meeting tonight, and thank you, Chairman. My question is, what is the outstanding debt service for WHP pertaining to this budget, and how do you foresee any future large bond payment increase of this magnitude? Thank you.
Certainly. I will defer to
Finance Director Brett Taylor.
Good evening, everyone. As you may know, whenever we go out for a bond issue, we allocate those debt service payments across departments that are germane to those particular allocations, for those particular projects. The allocation for the Department of Real Estate and Housing is due to the bond issue taking out and refinancing the $3.2 million Wilmington Housing Partnership bond anticipation note. What has occurred is when we have taken the refinancing, put it in place using a long-term bond issue, which we did in November, we usually take those bond payments, those debt service payments, and allocate them across the departments. In this particular case, the $3.2 million in bond anticipation notes, which was taken out subsequently by the bond issue, were considered taxable issues. That taxable issue, generally speaking, when you amortize these across the 20 years, you have an economic and financial benefit if you take the taxable issue and pay it off first. So therefore, we had taken the $3.2 million of the overall $88 million bond issue and are going to be paying that off first amongst all of the bond issues over the 20-year time period. That's going to save us a significant amount of money if we take that taxable issue and amortize it. I believe it's over 2 years, but the majority of the debt service payment is going to occur next year. This debt service payment will therefore drop in the following year because we will have paid off that particular taxable issue.
All right, thank you very much, Director Taylor. And with that, I then would like to turn over to Real Estate and Housing Director Bob Ware for any opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, President Congo, honorable members of City Council. It's my honor to be working for the citizens of the City of Wilmington, working at the pleasure of the mayor and working with you, City Council, to problem solve and to improve the quality of life for the residents of the City of Wilmington. The department vision for the Real Estate and Housing Department is to improve that quality of life for the residents, to increase the supply of affordable housing, improving housing markets and existing housing stock, promoting self-sufficiency and engaging in activities to stabilize and revitalize neighborhoods. Next slide, please. Our top three priorities are increasing the supply of affordable housing that's decent, safe, and sanitary, engage in activities geared towards stabilization and revitalization of our neighborhoods, and increase homeownership opportunities through the city. That's with collaboration between nonprofits and for-profits. So there are three top priorities. Next slide, please. We talk about performance measures. I think everyone's aware that the bulk of our budget is grant funds from HUD, the Housing and Urban Development department of the federal government. And our performance measures are really to administer and fund housing programs that preserve that existing housing stock, but that is also in line with the requirements of those grants. To increase the availability of affordable housing units. We do that both with partners and from this department itself. And we also support organizations that provide services to the Wilmington's most needy residents. Next slide, please. Thank you. This question, if I'm not mistaken,
Question one, right?
Question one, I think so.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right, so this is a CARES Act funding, and same question we've been asking every department. I think specifically your department, it's very important. So, what has the impact of the CARES Act reimbursements been for your department? Where do you see that impact going forward?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The $12.4 million in CARES Act funds is not really as far as salient to the HUD funds that we've gotten, the COVID HUD funds. But when we look at it, this is the answer that I believe the committee has heard before, that it's eligible MS&E expenses, largely not expended from our budget line. Special projects was set up under the Office of Emergency Management to record COVID-related expenditures, and that's PPE, cleaning supplies, sanitation services, and technology expenses necessary to support the transition of work from home. Next slide, please.
Now, specifically in regards to CDBG funds, I understand that has impacted your department. So can you elaborate on that impact has been, the total amount expended on our project so far?
Absolutely. The CDBG funds that were received are $1.7 million. These do have the same exact requirements that other CDBG funds have, meaning that the agencies or individuals that are using these funds need to be eligible, and you need to be an eligible activity through the Fed guidelines. And what we have here is a list of organizations that we have gone under contract with to provide services relative to our mission statement and our goals of providing services to the most needy residents of the city of Wilmington. When we look at some of these headings, say for instance, Child Inc., they were doing quarantine work. DHSS, the state of Delaware, was doing motel vouchers. We have Friendship House that was also working with rapid rehousing for homeless. We have, as far as the LACC, that was using that for outreach, and the Lutheran Community Center was also using that for outreach, the United Way, the Emergency Shelter Grant, which is our next slide, but I can speak about it now. That's with, again, the Family Promise, Sojourner's Place. And when we look at those funds to date, we're estimating that there's 1,400 residents of the city of Wilmington that have been directly benefited from those funds. This is, of course, like everyone has talked about, it's a first time through for us. The contract that we've gotten under with these folks was very quick, and they're figuring out how to get it out the door too. So we were very fortunate in having a number of community partners that had already been vetted. We felt very comfortable in going into contract with these organizations, given that there is a possible liability if these funds are misspent or inappropriately spent. Then the city has a liability to pay those back. So we were very careful in vetting the organizations, and as we continue to work with them as far as any kind of technical assistance they need and communication on a regular basis. But when we look at it, that's the CDBG funds, and that's to date what has been under contract and used.
Okay. Thank you very much, Director Ware. And I want to slow down a little bit, actually. It's a lot to cover, in a short amount of time. Can you elaborate on the process used to select and to, make sure these funds get out of the door? I understand it was a somewhat truncated process, but can you explain to the public and the council exactly what that process was to vet these organizations?
Yes, It was a multi-tiered process. We first and foremost advertised that, and to meet federal requirements, that these funds were available. We also reached out to all the organizations that we had previously funded that we knew had programming that was consistent with the eligible activities. And at this point, it's still an open process. We do have monies available, and if there's anyone that comes to our door, to date, we have not turned any applications down, but there have been many organizations that have come and talked to us that once we have really understood what they want to do, whether they were eligible or not to the activities is where the discussion point was. There was also an internal committee that was meeting through the mayor's office that vetted these once we looked at those. So we felt that between the established organizations that were in our community already working, that were already familiar with federal funds and using in those ways, and their end use, this group was the strongest group that we could look at. But I'll go back to it that any group that came in that had an eligible activity was not turned away.
But I am looking at the agencies, Director Ware, and most of them are established agencies. So, I mean, was it just no kind of newer players that apply for it, or because of the time period, you came back to the established groups?
Well, I think the shortest answer is that the groups that came in and applied are the groups you see here that were funded.
Okay, so what you're saying, so there's no groups that applied that didn't receive funding?
Correct.
Pretty much. Okay, gotcha. And what was the time period that from advertising that they had to apply? Was it?
Gosh, I don't want to misrepresent that time period, but I believe that it was 30 to 45 days. But as I say, this is still an open process. So if someone would come to the department right now and say, I would like to apply for COVID CDBG funds, we would accept that. So there was no close date. The open date was to get the money out into the street as fast as possible. As of right now, there is no close date.
Is there a cap, Director Ware, since this is still open? I mean, is it $2 million, 2.5? And I mean, what's the cap on it?
Well, at this point, we have approximately $800,000 that's available. So, when we talk about the ability for these agencies to move the money out in the street, I think one of the things that I'd like to share is that there were a lot of funding sources available. And when we look at a federal funding source that requires, say, for instance, I use the example of, I know there's a program that delivers lunches, and from Parks and Recs, they go out and they set up a truck that pulls into a certain spot and they distribute lunches. Well, none of those folks that were taking lunch had to give any information about who they were, what their income was, any of those kind of things. This CDBG funding actually requires tracking of the client. So when you talk about what money can be used, that's available, but what agency actually is using it so that it is effective? So there was a lot of discussion with these agencies that said, hey, I have money, I can get money from other places to get done what I want to get done without having to go through the federal requirements. So when we think about generally with the budget out of real estate and housing, there's very little that we do by ourselves. There's always community partners. There's always, when you talk about whether it's actually a nonprofit or another governmental entity, there's very little that we do by ourselves. So when we talk about being distributed into the community, any of these agencies might look at it any given day and say, it's a little bit easier to use money that came in from the state, or a little bit easier to use money that came in from the county because of the record keeping requirements. So, when we talk about the CDBG end of it, it does have, it's onerous in some ways that there is a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of administrative burden.
All right. Director Ware, I believe Councilman Vice Chair Hartley has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And you did already answer some of my questions. Director Ware, thank you for always being available and very helpful when I call your office. My question to you is one, Was there any collaboration from any of the city council members as it related to decisions that were made for some of these agencies?
All this was approved by city council.
Well, I know the money's approved. I'm talking about earmarking, identifying these particular organizations where they're part of the discussion when you decided we're going to select LACC. And trust me, I think these are good organizations. This is not a trick question at all. I'm just trying to understand if there was some collaboration of one or two of any of the council members. That's all.
From my perspective, there was an open door, but I cannot point out that there was any recommendations from a city council member that said, I would like to see this agency funded. Okay, all right. So you anticipate funding coming in for the next budget year to help with these organizations? And I heard you say that there's funding still for us to be more engaged and to be involved, because we are. This is an opened application period. So I would certainly, I welcome the communication at this committee meeting, and I would welcome communication from services. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
CDBG money.
Councilmember Gray, can assist with? It sounds like you're in outer space. No. WITN?
May I proceed?
Oliver, while we try to work out the technical difficulties with Councilmember Gray.
Is there still a technical difficulty? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. My understanding is we're going to get a lot of CDBG money. Might need to mute her microphone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a statement.
Breakout room.
To Mr.
Maybe Councilmember Gray can be taken to a breakout room. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Councilmember Oliver, the floor is yours. We're gonna.
I just want to thank Bob Weir for sending the spreadsheet out. I was able to help some constituents who had some issues because of COVID and ran across some hard times. I know I sent them over, Kingswood. I was able to send quite a few to Catholic charities. A lot of them on the east side told me they went to Central Baptist. And I know some of the constituents over Riverside was able to get some help and even get, money. I mean, I think they always see some checks over there due to this money. So I just wanted to thank him for sending me the spreadsheet, and I was able to give it out to some of the constituents. I know we talked about this at a committee meeting and we requested for this, and he did send it out. So I just wanted to thank you for doing this. And that CDBG funds, you were able to help Jesse and James. So this was very useful to me. So I just wanted to thank you so much. And
very welcome.
When the next round, whenever comes, please send us another spreadsheet so I'm able to assist with some more constituents with this funding. And I just thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. And Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you very quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob, could you please explain, and forgive me if I missed your explanation on this. State of Delaware, what are they doing with us?
Well, say, for instance, the federal government gave the state of Delaware for rental assistance. We are not prohibited from supporting rental assistance for the city of Wilmington, but when we look at the major funding for rental assistance, it's coming out of DSHA. So, again, I mentioned that, this real estate and housing department using federal money, there's very little we do by ourselves. If someone calls us directly and says, hey, we're looking for rental assistance, we say, DSHA is the number, here's the number, and here's the process that you go through. If it's a rapid rehousing that the Family Promise can do, that's one of our community community partners, so we send them out there. When we look at this department, we only have 11 folks in here, and we are limited with our administrative cap. So, it actually works out very well that we have a strong network with the community groups and the other state and county organizations. The idea that we're trying not to duplicate any services that are being provided to the residents.
Thank you. I got all that. I just didn't quite get that they were dealing with rental health. So thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much. I believe Council Member Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I actually had the same question that Councilman Walsh had, but also in addition to that, I know we talked about it before, Director Weir, regarding how are these organizations marketing that they received this funding or working in the community? Do you know how these agencies are doing that, or do we collect that information?
Councilwoman, we're still waiting as far as the timeline for some of these reports to come back. When we talk about how they're marketing, I believe that they're marketing, they have available funds for the various needs. And then what they do, much like we do with our rehab programs, is that they then internally slice and dice it so that the best program that are available to the actual needs of the individuals. I'll use the, say for instance, with the rapid rehousing that Family Promises is doing, that might not be the same as the shelter operations that they're doing. So once the client gets in contact with the agencies, they, on a one-on-one basis, try to fit the best services to them. When we talk about, say for instance, there are dollars involved in these that are marketing dollars, but they're limited because of the federal restrictions. They basically get a 20% cap too.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Director Weir.
All right. Thank you very much, Director Weir. And Councilmember Gray, if you can hear me, I'm not skipping over you. We're going to have to circle back with you. WITN is reaching out to you.
You can hear me. Am I still on?
It's still not fixed.
Okay.
WITN will reach out to you directly. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Again, Councilmember Gray, if you can email me or Marshall, that'd be fine if there's a question you want me to ask, but we can just follow up later with that question, okay? All right, so let's keep, I know we have a big agenda for real estate and housing, so let's try to keep it moving. And question number 3 is about American Rescue Funds, Director Weir. Specifically, are there any tentative plans on how this could potentially be used? And I understand, again, there's not guidance. We have that caveat, but especially your department, I imagine with these funds, your department will be crucial in trying to get the money out into the street. So do you have any plans or any thoughts?
Oh, Chair Johnson, you're absolutely right. As far as there is absolutely no guidelines right now, we're actually into that next level where there's rumor and innuendo. I would like to share with the committee that, I believe that there will be federal guidelines on these funds, and when we talk about how we can use them, that's kind of what the framework that I've been using as far as in planning. Real Estate and Housing Department has been working in several neighborhoods to actually do street verifications. When we look at programming that we hope we'll find ineligible activities for is for, number one, the folks that own their properties right now that have deferred maintenance that we might be able to help. So what does that mean? That means roofs. That means heaters, kitchens, bathrooms, exteriors that might have been subject to violation from L&I. When we look at the quality of life in the neighborhoods, we're looking at possible uses of the monies to look at the properties that are falling down and their blighting influence is a danger to the neighborhood, and to take those worst of the worst buildings down, to take the vacant properties, to stabilize them by putting roofs on them, whether there's end user in sight or not, but to stop the continued deterioration of the building, not only the building that's vacant, but the building that's on both sides, and oftentimes they're occupied. So, you know, when you talk about these vacant properties, they have a tendency to leak their destruction into the properties next to them, because we have so many road properties and so many properties that are attached. So, you know, we're looking at on a street by street basis, where are the owners, what conditions are their properties in. So we're trying to put a price tag on that. We're looking at what are the worst of the worst properties that they're not going to do. There's no change that'll happen to those properties unless it's additional deterioration. So we have to prioritize those. And, you know, I don't want to, I've said this before to council, I don't want to be the guy that tore the city down. But when you look at a property that there's no way that you can bring that property back unless you have $100,000 to $150,000 in subsidy, then I think we need to look at different answers to it. When we look at properties that have been vacant, that have been deteriorating, you know, can we arrest that deterioration by putting a roof on, by stripping it out, by more or less setting it up for success? We are actually in an experiment in West Center City right now where we went in and put roofs on 8 properties and stripped them out of the asbestos and all the interiors, so that anyone that's looking at them, it's not like an Easter egg hunt where they walk in a building and say, I wonder what's behind that wall, or I wonder what that foundation looks like. We tore it all out. And it's a relatively low number that it's cost to do that. It's roughly under $20,000. So we're hoping that what we can do is in stabilization, we can set these vacant properties up so they attract private investment, they attract homesteaders rather than scare them. The properties that are, you know, the spots that are falling down, that are beyond repair, be realistic about it and say, hey, we got to take those out and we got to figure out what we're going to do. You know, can we be clever enough to look at some of those properties with some of the other vacant lots? If you look at the city communities, oftentimes properties that need to be torn down, one next to it probably needs to be torn down too. And can we create some buildable sites? Because if you tear down one 14-foot wide building, you cannot build back there. So, you know, we need to be clever as far as when we talk about clearance, but absolutely, you know, the blighting influence of a vacant property, it damages the community. And I think that needs to be a priority. So if you're asking me professionally with the American Rescue Funds, I'd like to see a stabilization effort that would include homeowners, that would include vacant properties, and would include demolitions of the properties that are too far gone.
Thank you very much, Director Ware. And again, I'd say, you know, we've asked each department had this question, and I say you elaborated probably the most so far. So,
well, we've been doing a lot of work. We're fortunate that we have a GIS data tech in our department at this point, and we've been actually mapping stuff. And you know, we're really trying to be prepared. I mean, the mayor has asked me to, you know, be ready. And that's what we've been working at as far as, you know, the pandemic has cut short some of the activities that we had been naturally heading towards as far as doing, say, for instance, you know, the management of owner-occupied rehab. And what we did with the staff is that we put them back on the street and we had them walking the street and doing data collection.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, do you believe that these funds will have the same, you know, tight stipulated restrictions that the CDBG funds have, or you think it'll be a little bit wider?
I hope it's wide open. I mean, I would hope that it is as it was meant to be, to really, you know, build us back better than we were, not just to get us back to where we were, but I have no idea. I mean, as far as I think I'm preparing for the worst, and ready to run if there's a opening.
And while I have you on this question, as a follow-up, I don't believe it was in probably your preparation materials, but we had a presentation by a anti-violence group from Minnesota, I guess at a committee meeting a few weeks ago. And they actually used CBDG dollars for anti-violence programming. Has there been any thought of doing that? I mean, or has it been done so far? And we just aren't aware of it.
Well, in our yearly budget, we have youth and families category that, say, for instance, this year's $100,000 in CDBG going into that category. As I mentioned earlier, we do very little that we're the only funders. So, when you look at that $100,000, that's probably going to leverage. I have it in my notes here, but it leverages a lot more than that $100,000. So, when we talk about what we're doing right now, families and youth services, we already have investment from CDBG. When we talk about this particular COVID CDBG, that's a hard fit. But when we talk about American Rescue Plan, that might be a good fit.
All right. I'd like to turn over to my colleagues, Council Member Cabrera.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Weir. So nice to see you. My question is this, because this has come up several times in some of our meetings in terms of the vacant lots that are created when we do tear up these homes. And as you mentioned, if they're 14 feet wide, realistically, we can't build on them. The conversation has come up about why aren't we building homes on these vacant lots and utilizing the space. I keep mentioning the de-density that we are working on. But what would you suggest that the city could do with those spaces other than gardens? I mean, they could be open spaces. Having community gardens is great, but then they have to be maintained because that creates another problem if they're not maintained. We voted on a resolution to advertise that these lots are available, even just by putting a for sale or for rent sign or something like that. But as the director of real estate and housing, what would be your recommendations? What could the city do with these spaces?
From my experience, once you have a lot, and as the city, we then will take any trash off it. We'll keep it cut. We'll keep it this. There's very few people that say, geez, I think I'd like to do that for the city, and I'd like to take responsibility for that lot, even if I live next door. So the city keeps it cut, the city keeps it clean, and the next door neighbors say, great, thank you. We'll use it when we need to. My thought about it would be that we need to look at our codes, and we need to think about what our market is. When you look at some cities, I'm not talking about a tiny house per se, because if you look at a tiny house, that oftentimes is, 600 or less square foot. But I'm thinking about, are we really looking at the designs that attract a market that would come into the city and live? I know people joke about this when I say it, but, do you need a kitchen, great space, a bedroom or a loft, and then someplace to put your bike, your kayak? I mean, I'm talking about young people. Is it a situation where, when we talk about affordable housing, well, one of the only ways you can really look at it is how do you keep the cost down is square footage. If we're building 2,000 square foot houses and it's costing you $150 or $190 a square foot, that's the cost. And if your value of it afterwards is only $70 a square foot, that's the gap. So if we look at some of these smaller lots and we really look at them as an architectural challenge and an architectural problem to solve, that we actually change some of the code so that we can put some of these houses in there. When you talk about zero lot lines that people have to go to for variances on, well, a lot of times people look at that and say, that time is money and I don't feel like doing it. I'll do it out in the county. Are there ways that we might be able to look at those lots in a comprehensive way and change our zoning and requirements and our variance requirements so that it becomes more attractive? One of the things we talk about when we take down buildings is, right now we cut the sewer and the water off. Well, is there a way that we could actually install the service so then we advertise these lots as builder ready? I'm not talking about the 14-foot wides because they're tough no matter what. But, if we have 2 or 3 properties that we've taken down, if we actually stub the water and sewer in as part of the demo and then advertise it as builder ready, builders, that's builder talk. They understand that. They also understand that if they come into the city and it takes them 6 weeks or 8 weeks to get all their approvals, that's 6 or 8 weeks that's costing them money. So, I think in some ways we have to look at it as being business friendly. I think in some ways we have to think about it in design and what the requirements of or what the desires of the market are, and see if we can match those up so that we can get it done as fast as possible, that we're matching up with what people want. And, if you look at it, family formations are down. There's plenty of people that are living in 800 or 900 square foot apartments. And if you could offer them ability to build equity, that seems to me to be attractive when you talk about some of those lots.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Comment. Thank you for that answer, because this is something that we as council members have been discussing, and it has come up in forms of resolutions. And this is something that we should work together. As you're saying, if we need to change these zoning laws, and then we are the legislators here, then we have that ability to do that. Because now you're talking a really good language there. Builder ready. Now we can get people to come in and invest, and we can have homes for people here in the city. So thank you so much for that very clear answer. Thank you.
Very welcome.
So I believe Councilmember Gray has a question, but she still is having technical issues.
Can you hear me? No, I've logged out and logged back in. Can you hear me?
Now it's better. Okay, there you go. I was going to read your question for you, but you sound good.
Well, I may have missed this, but I really wanted to know what is the expected amount of the CDBG funds that we are to get from the Rescue Act?
Councilman Gray, I am not sure that the Rescue Act will be CDBG, but we did get a notice last week that said there's going to be a combination of CDBG home regulations, and we've been awarded $2.1 million. Of course, I jumped right on it. I got on a webinar. I tried to find out more information about it. And basically what they said to me was that we'll come out with the regs and the process in late fall. So they've made a commitment to the city at 2.1 million, but they're not promising any rules or regs until late September. So at this point, I can tell you that we have been awarded $2.1 million. I can't tell you what we can use it for yet. And I see that your second question is a follow-up as far as the Hope Center. Right now, we not only have offered technical capacity and help for them getting off the ground, but also we have committed for ESG funds to the Hope Center. The issue with us is that, and it's a crazy one, that we can't give money to a facility outside the city with ESG funds, with emergency service grant funds. What we can do is we can say to a facility outside the city, if you're serving a Wilmington resident, we can pay for that. But we can't just give them a grant and say, use it as you like. Now, the question I asked was, how can you tell a homeless person has an address in the city of Wilmington? So they said, of course, they came back and they said, well, technically that's the last address they had, so forth and so on. So we actually have offered assistance to the Hope Center through the CDBG and ESG funds. The idea is it has to be reimbursed on services, and they have to document that the services were provided to a Wilmington resident.
Follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Well, I know CDBG funds are from the county go to Riverside. So the reverse, we have some restriction in the city that we can't do the reverse. But before you answer that, I also wanted to ask something else. I forgot what it was. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'd have to follow up with that as far as I'm not aware of the funding source from the county's assistance over at Riverside.
Okay. The other thing was that you were saying that you defer to state agencies for programs. And by doing that, I think that you put our citizens in a pool that is larger than if we had our own services. And one, for example, and I'll ask this question first, does Wilmington have a first down payment assistance program for home buyers?
Not for the general public at this time.
And where do you refer people for that?
DSHA's programs.
Okay, well, just a heads up, you were really, Wilmington, not you personally, was really criticized at a National Association of Realtors and Estate Brokers meeting, Zoom meeting yesterday for not having that program. And that was their point, that we were putting our citizens in a pool much.
It goes back to, I guess, the previous thing you were speaking of, especially when it came to have it hired, in order to make certain that people can just come and get things done, to really start trying to the housing that we have. Houses for sale and the rentals are going up fast. We really would like to be, they're going pretty quickly. We really like to make certain that since we have so many renters in here within the city, that, we can prepare some of these houses. I don't want to discourage developers. I just don't want to,
Not at all, Director Ware, or brief comment?
Well, the challenge, and I mentioned sometimes it's an architectural challenge, but I also am very in tune with the properties that are not only not good matchups because of their size and their configuration, but they are not good matchup because of their location and condition. And we have to be as clever as possible. I agree that with my first comment that I agree, that's part of our experimentation in West Center City right now, to take properties and to stabilize them. Stabilization, it costs you a lot less and you end up with a lot more. However, I still feel strongly that when you talk about digging ourselves out of the hole, when you see properties that have been vacant and abandoned for 25 plus years, and when you talk about the amount of money that's needed, then there's got to be some hard decisions made. And I think they need to be made in concert with, I can't be the smartest person in the room, and nobody's smarter than everybody. So, I don't think this should be without feedback. But there are properties. We went out and we did a street survey with the land bank inventory. And there are at least 50 of their properties, their structures, that are in danger of falling down. And if you look at them, they have a history of long-standing vacancy, and they're pulling the properties down next to them. So, when you talk about demolition, I don't want to be that person that leaves a toothy and no plans in the future for them. And, there's green that we have to keep cutting the grass and picking the trash up from them. So I agree with the point, but I think that we have to be more realistic that there are some properties that are just too far gone.
All right, thank you very much, Director Ware. And I want to jump right into question 4. Slide. He discussed any proposed changes to positions. This is new positions, deleted positions, upgrades, downgrades, title changes, and other related changes.
Yes, in this budget, there is a position conversion from an acquisition disposition manager to a director of development for the real estate and housing department. That is question 4, if we can move forward for that. The numbers that were presented in the early part of the conversation about the increases, some of those are inevitable and can't be moved, but the salary and benefit increase for this particular conversion is $3,310. This reflects not only split funding so that we'll be able to task this person with more activities that are not federally limited, but also there's additional work that needs to be done when we talk about, when I talk about how we've been out in the streets. We also went through WHA's inventory, and we actually street verified their inventory. One of the things that we are focusing on, and the mayor has asked me to look at, is, how can we achieve more stabilization in our neighborhoods and increase the quality of life? Well, that means that the land bank, the city, the housing authority need to work closer together. And this development director's position their responsibility will include that task of pulling together those organizations so that we're working hand in glove rather than independently. And we can look at some of these properties that, that need to have immediate attention, and they need to have triage. We do have on this slide also, there is some speaking to the split funding, how we are trying to be as clever as possible to use the HUD funds and not to overrun our HUD funds and spill into the general fund. So we also have had a split funding change in the program administrator, and that really resulted in some savings. So that we're very, very committed to our budgetary life in real estate and housing, and to make sure that it's consistent with what HUD wants us to do and what the city needs us to do.
Very much. Now turning to question number 5. If you could discuss the proposed $500,000 in grant funds to the Wilmington Land Bank.
Okay. The memorandum of understanding that was dated in 2016 between the city and the land bank committed the city to $15 million over 10 years. To date, the city has allocated $2,499,000. That was no funds in 2018 or 2019, which were very lean years. That was $1 million last year. When we talk about what the land bank is doing for the city, again, it's the mission is the same. Stabilization of our neighborhoods. When we talk about the elimination of our problem properties, which is, when you talk about the quality of life, that has a lot to do with it. When we talk about the utilization of the money this year for operations and maintenance, the state has allocated $1.6 million. The land bank is requesting $1 million. They will request $1 million in the state bond bill this year. I believe that there was a year-end report that was distributed to City Council earlier this week that outlined some of the things that they've been able to accomplish. The $500,000 of $550 is what it moved down, $550, and then actually it was $500. We look at that complements what the city is doing as far as keeping their properties clean, cut, secure. They have done some good work this year, in my opinion, of moving properties out of their inventory. But I think we also have to watch that to take a property and to move it out of the inventory for minimal price. We have to make sure that there's action with those properties, not just disposition, because we're really just at that point pushing the problem onto somebody else. We all know that our tax base is so small in the city of Wilmington, allows people to own properties and not utilize them. We don't want somebody that's buying and boarding. Right now there is a movement across the real estate industry that 1 in 5 properties that are bought are never occupied by the buyer. So, when we talk about homesteading, we think that's an important piece of it. And this is just really operational. In their report, they've taken down I don't have the exact number in front of me, but they've taken down quite a few of these problematic properties that were falling down. I mean, in reality, they are the receivers of property that the market tells us that has no value. I mean, the properties, we had 27 or 28 properties that went to sheriff's sale this week, and 2 were bought back by the city. One happened to be a lot. So that one property, the marketplace said, we don't want to buy that property because we don't think that there's any value in it. So, when you look at it, we still are cleaning up a little bit from the inventory that was given to the land bank that had some long-term, long-standing issues in the community. And part of that, is the partnership with them to get those things cleaned up.
Now, specifically on subpart D, they related to the American Rescue Plan and the land bank. Do you anticipate or do you have hopes that some of the ARP funds will be able to be used for the land bank?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about our survey of their inventory, we thought that there's a minimum of 50 properties that should be taken down. Well, we also started looking at the correlation of, is there a vacant lot next to a property that needs to be taken down, so we can actually build a new properties back there. But we also looked at how many of their properties could enjoy stabilization. And we looked at those properties, which is roughly 2/3 of their inventory, and that represents about $800,000 of stabilization. So, we've been trying to get ourselves prepped up and be able to tell the story that, and we've told the story. I've made a presentation to our federal delegation and to the governor under the mayor's direction that, when we talk about we need money and we know exactly what we use it for. If we would take the properties as stabilization and take the properties that are falling down, taking them down, that would be a significant improvement in quality of life in our neighborhoods.
Thank you very much for carrying that out. But I believe Councilmember Dixon has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to echo what Director Weir was saying. Being on the technical board side of the land bank, a lot of times they are getting the properties that are a lot of times unable to be a lot of repaired, especially we need a lot more gap funding in order to get them back online, especially in a lot of times the housing is costing you more to actually renovate it and do it again. And that takes a lot more funding opportunities that most of the time, a lot of times is not there. So I do want to agree to that. I know that I see on a slide that it's $15 million over 10 years. I just wanted your opinion, Director Weir. Do you think we'll ever get to that number by 2026? Especially because of the different things that are happening with the economy, and maybe some of the funding that's coming in through the American Rescue Plan may help out with that number some. But based on our numbers so far, it doesn't seem like we would be on track to be able to give them the 15 million within that time period.
Well, I'd like to go on record saying I think 15 million is light when you talk about really changing Wilmington into the dynamic city that we all see it being. When we talk about catching up, I think you're absolutely right that if we have some assistance from outside of our normal revenue streams, that would be a gigantic help. I also have to tell you that, my personal opinion of having gas go to $6 a gallon would be one of the best things that could happen to Wilmington, because everybody would then look at how they could live where they work. So, I think there's a lot of external issues that really are going to affect it. And when we talk about the American Rescue Plan, those funds certainly would go a long way into helping our community if they're all allowable activities.
Thank you, Director Weir.
Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I forgot what I was going to ask him. Can you address how they work with vacant lots? I am aware on Market Street there are several vacant lots, and we were hoping that that you could assume them and then sell the lots, build houses on them. So how do you deal with private ownership wanting to transfer properties to the land bank?
Well, I can use the example of, and this is kind of like the secret sauce that the land bank has, is that there can be a donation of property to the land bank, and the donator can actually get a tax write-off. Now, of course, the land bank doesn't guarantee any tax write-offs, and that's all about the conditions and the situation that the donator is in. But there are properties at 35th Street that have been or in the process of being exchanged to the land bank, and that's a perfect example of some of the things the land bank could do that the city can't. If that person that owned those properties wanted to give it to the city, there was no tax break, versus they donated them to the land bank. The land bank then can offer them a value statement, and they can use that as a tax write-off. And then the land bank, if I'm not mistaken, the land bank actually has those out for an RFP right now for home ownership. So that's a great example of some of the things that the land bank can do that the city cannot. Follow
up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Is that 35th and Market Street?
It's right next to the cemetery?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. We've been working on that for a long time. Thank you.
Yeah, that's going to be, there's 17 lots there that are already, they're all builder ready. So that's, they're all stubbed out with utilities. That's an exciting spot, I think.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. I believe we have Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, a few moments ago, you mentioned that it would take millions of dollars to transform Wilmington into the dynamic city that it needs to be. Can you just expand on that?
15 million. I didn't hear Trippy's question.
When you say dynamic city, like, what's your vision?
Councilmember Gray and others, you just mute your mics when you're not on. Okay, thank you. All right, Council President, the floor is yours again. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. I'm not sure if you heard my question, Mr. Weir, Director Weir.
No, I didn't. Would you mind repeating?
Yes, a few moments ago, you mentioned that more than $15 million would be needed to transform Wilmington into the dynamic city that we all want. What is your vision of Wilmington becoming a dynamic city? What does that mean to you? What does that look like to you as far as, housing?
Well, I think that, the old saying is, how do you know you're in a bad neighborhood? It looks like a bad neighborhood.
Step in here. Again, we have a lot to get through. So you briefly just go over this, and then,
sure.
I mean, the budget, real estate, housing vision, that's a longer talk that I think we will have to do in committee.
And I'd be more than happy to either take it offline or to come back to the committee and discuss it. But I think it's a community that is, the housing's maintained. It's a community that there's work for the people in the community. It's a community that is not necessarily dominated by the car. So I think there's a lot of our streets that could be looked at and closed down for green space or closed down for public space rather than just having cars go on them. I think there's, I talked earlier about some of the changes in our code for building. I also think that there's a gigantic opportunity to take some of the back alleys and clean them out so that they become thoroughfares and the streets in front of the houses become public space that people can enjoy.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other questions on 4? I mean 5. All right. At this time, then, I would like to move Director Weir to question number 6. Discuss available fund balance in the housing opportunity funds, and also talk about what the plans are going forward for refunding it, and any if there's any interplay with the potential ARP funds or ARF funds.
Well, I can say that there's no fund balance available in the Housing Opportunity Fund right now. And as far as to the best of my knowledge, there's no plans to replenish it. However, you're absolutely right that I think there's a hope that the American Rescue Plan funds could be a source of that. When we talk about, we're talking with lenders because we know that small contractors need to have a credit line so that they can float work so that when they're paid within 30 or 60 days, they can actually pay their workers and buy materials. So we know that that's a need, but we think that that might be a private, public-private partnership that we could put together there. We know that there is a need to have developers that know what they're doing, and we know that the Jumpstart program is starting to develop those kind of folks. So when we talk about the use of those American Rescue Fund resources, we have, at least from my perspective, we have a whole shopping list that we could start plugging in there. The idea that if we are going to be in the business of leaving $100 or $1,000 or more per house, because that's the difference between what the value is and what it costs to bring it back, that just limits the numbers that we're going to be able to do it with the money that's available.
Okay, and just to kind of break it down to basics, Director Ware, because we do have several new council members. Can you explain the purpose of the Housing Opportunity Fund versus CDBG funds, just briefly?
The Housing Opportunity Fund was much more flexible, in as much that there wasn't an income cap. So that when you talk about, say, for instance, CDBG funds, perfect example is that we're using federal funds on Spruce Street to develop in the 700 block a homeownership unit. That unit's probably going to cost about $250,000 to renovate. You had to drop the front off of it and put it back together. But the federal requirements, the folks that are going to buy that home probably can only afford about 140 to 150, subject to the mortgage rates. They're very low right now. So there's going to be a gap of approximately $100,000 in that particular situation. If you talk about a development where you might put 40 townhouses in and selling them for $220 or $240 right now, then you're going to see people that are going to be making 120 to 150 area median income. That would be a good place to plug housing opportunity funds to help that happen.
Okay. Now, when was the last time there was a cash infusion into this fund?
Not since I've been in this chair this time around.
So it's been
18.
over 4 years.
Hey, I came in July of 18, so we haven't seen any refunding of that since that point.
Okay. So
Probably been close to 8 years, Chairman Johnson, since there was an infusion.
okay, and do you know approximately how much that infusion was? This is either for Director or Chief of Staff.
I can't recall. Actually, I think we put a little bit of money in there when the land bank was created.
Okay.
So the money may have come out of the Housing Opportunity Fund into the land bank.
Got it. All right. Now turning to no question on that. Turning to question number 7. This I know there's been a lot of questions as we've been going through this process. So question number 7, can you clear up some questions about the neighborhood clean teams? I believe there's $700,000 proposed for the neighborhood clean teams, and it's a $300,000 increase. And I know this is one of the major changes in the mayor's budget. So can you please explain it in the details and the nitty gritty? Because it's I believe all my colleagues have questions about it. So, please feel free to dig in on this one.
Okay. I want to share as much information as I can and help everyone understand. As far as the amount of funds that have been expended year to date are 100%, because what we did is we encumbered those funds with the participating organizations. Although it's seasonal and they do not work during the colder months, that contract was a full year. So all those funds from the 2021 year are encumbered or dispersed. When we talk about, what's our measures to determine the program as a success, the soft measurements is travel in any neighborhood when they're out and working, and it's a different place. One of the things that this initiative allows us to do is to go on private property and pick up trash. Where city workers are prohibited from doing that. So when we talk about what happens, we have a project manager that has been hired. They turn in reports based on the amount of trash that they pick up in the designated areas, and then we reimburse on a PO basis, so that the money might be encumbered, but it's not distributed until there's actual reports of their activities on the street. That's regular progress reports. One of the things that did happen is that we added for the 2022 year Little Italy into the 6 areas that we are currently working in. And there was also an acknowledgement that these nonprofits that were running these crews needed to look at all the proper unemployment insurances, workman's comp, all those things that moved up the costs, not significantly, but enough that with a new area and with those acknowledgments that there had to be additional funds to make sure that it was being run the right way, and also administrative costs. I mean, all these organizations have to have a administration activity too. So just because we have a project manager, the project manager does not run the individual organization's admin. So there was an acknowledgement between our partners that they couldn't continue unless they had some additional resources.
Okay, and I'm sure there's a few different areas I want to follow up on. So I guess first is just, is there a reason why that the city uses these contracted service companies instead of making them, I guess, city employees?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that it allows them to go on the private property. And when you talk about picking up trash in the neighborhoods that they're currently working in, there is a lot of private property that the trash exists on. And I'm sure everyone's aware, you know, that when the wind blows, the trash is heavier in the streets because the cans go running. But I think also that there's a acknowledgement that these folks are seasonal workers, that they are not paid benefits, that they're being set on a course that they have work history. So that's, you know, does that allow them to say to when their public works job opens up, hey, I've worked for the clean team. Is that an opportunity that when something opens up in the downtown visions, hey, I've worked for the clean team. So it's not per se a job training. It is really a clean the streets program, but we feel that the participants we are setting them up for a trajectory where they have work history. And if they want to move on from that, they have the ability to do it.
I believe so. Several of my colleagues have questions. So let's start with Councilmember Gray. Marianne, what's up first? Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to know why North Market Street is not on this list, and I would like it to be included. It is a trash-laden street in my district, and we really need the help. So I want to know why we're not listed. And once you give me the reason why we're not listed, I'd like to be put on this list for 2022. Thank you.
And as I've stated earlier, Councilmember Gray, if there's programmatic issues, again, we can handle that offline. Since it's not really a budgetary question, I think it's more of a strategic question.
Excuse me, it is a budgetary question because I have to vote for this budget, and I want to know why my district is not included.
All districts in the coverage. This is a decision with administration in real estate housing. So it's a strategic reason. I don't know why. I'm just saying.
That's the reason I'm asking why. Could you let him answer my question, please? I didn't ask you. Thank you, Chair.
Say, why is it not here? Why is it not there? I'm just saying we've been pretty good about following the rules. Let's take that offline and we can discuss it as a non-budgetary item. Okay. All right. Do you have any other questions?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I tend to disagree. This is a budgetary item because if my district is not included, I may not be supportive of this budget of this department. So I would like for the question to be answered by the department, why my area is not covered, and if it can be included in this budgetary item.
Well,
would you let him answer, please? I'm just asking for that.
Budget, as much as this question relates to the budget and not a strategic decision, can you please elaborate?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Gray, the Northeast does include some of Market Street. I'd have to get the map out to say where it stops and starts. I hear you. I actually travel Market Street on a regular basis back and forth to work, and I agree with you that there is a need there. I know that the clean team is on Market Street, but how far they go out, and I can get back to you and see if there is any possibility of moving that further down on Market Street.
Thank you, Mr. Weir. That was like 1 minute versus the prior discussion. Thank you very much. I think it ends at about 23rd Street and my district starts at like 26th, but thank you for the information that you will provide later.
Okay, all right. I appreciate Council Member Gray. If you can, I believe Council Member Dixon's next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple things. One, is there a way for street cleaning teams to have like uniform type of attire when they're out, just so that people know who they are, and they're visible within the communities? Is that something that they would have to purchase on their own, or is that something as part of the budget that we could?
It's currently not in the budget for uniforms. That is, we're trying to be austere as possible. We're trying to do with what we can with what we have. The idea that we added an area, and I agree with you that ideally having identification would be great for many, many reasons. I think that's something, again, offline we should look into and see if there's any possibilities. The first thing that hits my mind is, is there a private business that would help sponsor it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and can I follow up, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, Director Ware, that would be great if we can find a do. I just want to make sure that people, understand that they're part of this larger initiative. And then also, I know you mentioned Little Italy as an addition to the ones that are on the list currently. Is that the only new location? Because I thought I heard there was two. I was just...
At this point, the coverage area includes the west side of the city, west side, Browntown, Hedgeville, east side, northeast. I don't have the exact dimensions of the Little Italy. I think that's probably a very limiting description of the area that would be included. So I think that, again, I could follow up offline and get you the maps of that so that we can see exactly where that would include.
Thank you. That would be great. And then just one last comment. I would agree that there should be at some point a trajectory for them as far as like making sure that we're providing opportunities for the street cleaning team folks as they project in their career and from just starting in this job and this opportunity. So I think that's definitely and would love to have more conversations offline about how we do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Council Member. Council Member Fields, I believe you were next.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ware, for being here tonight. I just my one budget question to you is there, like, as far as water and I want to say, like water, gloves, trash bags, like, things that they would need during the summer months. Is that a part of the budget? Is that implemented in the budget as well for the organization?
Yes, and actually that was part of the discussion we had with the participating organizations that, as we move along, we are trying to get better. And, even down to, we had an issue last summer with the availability of bathrooms. So, we look at equipment, we look at, safety and service to the folks that are working in the clean team. So that's all part of the discussion. And it's a group discussion, group feedback.
Can I follow up, Chair?
Yes, please.
And does that include their reflector vests that they have now? Like some of them have some from last year, but like new ones.
I'm sorry, I can't really comment with any kind of reliability on that. I know that the organizations are working on a thin budget, so I'm sure that they take, the last year's vests or the person, if they left, they take that vest and redistribute it. But, again, if I think it's everyone's goal when we talk about uniforms, we talk about their presence on the street, we talk about how they look, how they feel about themselves. I think it's all on the priority list. It's just we have to match up the priority list with the available resources.
Okay, one more follow-up, Chair.
Yes, you may.
And this is just a comment. I just want to say that to me, you're doing a good job with the clean teams. I've had the opportunity to see what you're doing. So I see that the monies that you put in last year are benefiting the community. So, I'm just hoping that, this budget, is approved for, this line gets approved to move further. That's all. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ware.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Spadola.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ware. With this clean team budget essentially almost being doubled, do you see the teams being responsive to trash being outside these fixed areas and then being able to respond to it? Because just, we're going into this year, there could, other neighborhoods could produce more trash. It'd be a good service if the clean teams weren't just stuck in these 6 neighborhoods, which comes around, a little more than 100,000 for each neighborhood, when there's plenty of neighborhoods in the city not listed here that could use the help.
Well, without a doubt, I think that I'll go back to my former comment that I made earlier, that I think these areas that we say are coverage areas are limiting as much that Wilmington's a city of neighborhoods, right? When we talk about, like, say, for instance, Northeast, well, Northeast is a little bit on Market Street all the way down to Governor Prince. What I'd like to do is I'd like to distribute the maps so that we all are talking about the same areas. But I totally agree that, I think that if it was up to the mayor, he would have a clean team in every neighborhood.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? That's all right. If not, let's move to question number 8. Can you discuss the $300,000 budgeted for neighborhood stabilization of properties and demos that are not involved with federal funds? So this is outside of federal dollars.
Yes, right now we estimate for one demolition is $50,000. When we talk about stabilization, we're talking about $20,000. And then, of course, some of these properties that come into our inventory that have been dragging down the property next to them, one of the first things that happens is that when they realize that the city has control of the property, they call me up and they say, oh, yeah, by the way, this property's been leaking into my house for the last 10 years. What are you going to do about it? So in some ways, this budget line identifies some funds that we can use for miscellaneous projects that come up along those lines. When we look at, as much as we talked about earlier, as far as there are properties that are too far gone that need to be clear, there's properties that stabilization really is the answer. And does that move on to the land bank? The idea that there are nonprofits that are out there that are doing work, and that might move directly from the city to a nonprofit because of the location and what else they're doing there. So this line really represents the ability for the city to react. And I use that line, we stand behind what we do, so that when someone calls up and says, you guys got this at sheriff's sale, and it's been, there's a typical one is a tree. You show me a bad house and it's got a bad tree in the backyard. And, that tree, when it falls over, it doesn't fall into the yard that it sits in. It falls into the next door neighbors, and it takes the fence down, and, could it damage their house too? So this really represents a budget line that allows us to stabilize properties, to take the properties that are really bad down. And we do that in concert with license and inspection, with the land bank. So it gives us the ability to react to the constituents, and when they have problems, we have a line item that we can go to that's not limited by federal funds. Also, when you use federal funds on a property, that it's been said that it's $1 federal funds in the well, and the whole well now has to meet federal requirements. So a lot of times when we don't have any other funds than federal funds, you basically are locking yourself down. That's part of the issue with our current inventory. We have some properties that federal funds were used years ago on it, and the only solution is a federally approved activity on it. So it makes it much more difficult when all you have is federal funds. But I think at the bottom line, this really allows us to be reactive to the constituents when we control property, and to really increase the quality of life for the folks that are connected to the properties or on the block where these properties exist.
How many properties does approximately $300,000 get you? Because it's my understanding from L&I, it's about $50,000 per house. Is that the cost?
When we look at it over the last 10 years, demolitions are averaging $50,000 a piece.
So that gets you $300,000. That gets you only about 6 properties, right?
If you use it all for demo, yes. I mean, if you use some for stabilization, you put a couple new roofs on. I mean, that number goes down. So yeah, it's a lot of money for me, but when you look at what is it really, it's really reactive most of the time. That's, hey, here's a problem coming our way, and do we have some money to be able to deal with it so that the citizens are not dealing with it any longer than they have to.
Can you just discuss if any funds are recouped from these projects or from these demos?
Mr. Chair, I think the simplest answer is no. Are there occasionally properties that develop some sort of value if we can combine them? That's really the hope. But I think that we should not look at these investments in anything other than the quality of life of the neighborhood and the benefit to the neighborhood. I don't think these should be looked at as a income resource.
All right. Let's turn to question number 9, Director. It's you discussed approximately $50,000 budgeted for the Live Where You Work program. And for those folks in the public who aren't familiar with the program, it's for City of Wilmington employees. Can you break down how often this program has been used?
36 city employees have participated in the program in the last 2 years. We broke down the departments who's taken advantage of it. We do a presentation and employee orientation that's not a monthly basis, and it's been a little bit slower again during the pandemic. But this really, for the city employees, the job market, I don't know whether you describe it as being a hot market or not, but when someone is applying for a job in the city of Wilmington and you're told that you have to live in the city, this program basically gives those individuals some assistance. They do get a 1099 for it, so it's not a gift. There are requirements to go to housing counseling. There is requirements that they have to live in the house for a number of years. And as far as I believe that it was started as a model for a Live Near Your Work program for the private industry. And that was one of the things that we had started to put together with the land bank and their homesteading effort right before the pandemic came in, and the actual consultant that we had on board in the department here passed away. So between the kind of a perfect storm that we didn't get that moving, but that, it was mentioned earlier that the realtors would certainly appreciate funds that would make settlement easier for them. But I think that the real issue is that fees have gone up tremendously to settle on a house. And when you talk about affordability and the fees it takes to go to a settlement table, the settlement table fees have super accelerated. So that certainly would be something that I would like to see us develop going forward. And again, maybe those American Rescue Funds would be able to help us do that. Currently, there are a number of banks that do it. Not to get too deep into it, but as far as the CRA requirements have been lessened over the last couple of years. That used to be an easy place for banks to participate and meet their CRA requirements. We were very successful 15, 20 years ago in putting a lot of people in houses, and that would be something that I would like to prioritize going forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to delve into that a little bit because we are, I guess, in a unique circumstance. We're facing a housing kind of pricing where there's a severe lack of affordable housing. So is this a priority this next fiscal year, and really working on this Live Where You Work, where we're marketing it, and we're also getting the private employers involved? Because right now, very few families can afford to buy, even in this area. They're maybe going down south or going to out west where there's maybe more affordable areas. So can you touch on that about the plans going forward, especially, with first-time home buyers?
Well, we do have some funds in a consultant line to help us. When we talk about the prices, you're seeing anything between 15 and 21% increase. So you're absolutely right. But I think the hidden costs of homeownership is that when you have mortgage rates that are so low, you can get a mortgage today at like 2.25. What happens is the underwriting, there's a lot more fees. So, when you go to the settlement table and you have to come up with $16,000 or $17,000 for a $150,000 house, that is prohibitive. So, when we talk about that, yes, we do refer to DSHA, and certainly we want to be responsive to the citizens in our city that are currently renting and want to buy. And I think that's, part of it is a gigantic piece of it is education. Somebody has to say, yes, I want to do it. And then they have to follow through with all the details of making it happen. It's not easy. So yes, I think that, the plan for us would be to open it up to see if we can get some private sponsorship from some corporate entities. I mean, there's a lot of if-thens, if we can get some more money, because, my experience tells me that most corporates, when you say we want to do a Live Near Your Work, they say, okay, what are you putting in? We're going to have a partnership. What are you guys going to put in? So I think we have to start that conversation again. I think it started a number of times, but we were ready to launch it big time right before the pandemic. And, right now the land bank is running information sessions, and they're getting 60 people a month that go onto their Zoom meetings. And I think we could do the exact same thing with homeownership, partner with some of the counselors that we support, and geographically focus so that we are, when you talk about the big plan is to work in a neighborhood, take the bad properties down, stabilize the ones that can be stabilized, get them into the hands of the people who want to renovate them, and then make money available that for the folks that are not interested in renovating properties but just want to buy one, that, hey, when the properties come on market, they can settle on them.
Perfect. All right, Councilmember Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question, Director Weir, and I might have missed it, and I'm sorry, I apologize if I did. Did you say that the different organizations or different businesses that currently are working with us, and are they typically like the financial institutions that are within our city, or is there any, I know the hospital has come up before at one point. I didn't know if we have any like folks that are like those type of industries that are working with us to try to include their folks to live within the city too.
Again, I think the simplest answer is that right now, no, because we basically have gone dormant with this activity in losing our lead consultant on it, and combined with the pandemic. But that's, as things open up again, we have the budget line in our consultant line, and we have all the work that was done previously. We had 3 or 4 homeownership events over the weekends that we had 100, 150 people at each of those. We had multiple lenders that were there. I think that in some cases, the corporate jump to assisting their employees is a big one. Previously, we had been very successful in talking to the banks, and the banks really looked at it as that, hey, if we're giving somebody $7,000 to go to settlement, we're going to settlement with a mortgage that we're making $15,000 at settlement. So, it made financial sense to them. But I think in some ways what they did is they realized that they might not need a third party. They could just give that money directly to the buyer and have a little more control over it. So that's why we were having these events to have the banks there so they could promote their own product rather than one that we were controlling. And I think that's, at the end of the day, it's got to be some sort of a hybrid between those two. Because I think that really what happens is that, the folks that are in the 80 to 120 or 80 to 150 AMI, they have a little bit different needs than if you're trying to put somebody that's 80% AMI into home ownership. There's a little more sensitivity to some of the issues that they're dealing with. So, do we as a organization, the city, take on the folks that have a little more mountain to climb? And does the private sector take on the folks that might need a little help, but not a whole lot?
Okay, thank you, Director Weir.
Welcome.
All right. And to question number 10, Director, can you discuss approximately $40,000 for consultants pertaining to one roof in Munis?
Yes. Well, we are responsible because we're primarily grant funded. We are responsible for an additional level of accountability. The one roof is something that's unique to the real estate and housing department. Then, of course, the Munis program is the municipal program. And then that also has to be tied into the IDIS, which is the federal. The issue is that one roof and Munis and IDIS do not talk to one another. And, I was kind of silly when I first got here and said, well, maybe we should talk to IDIS and see if they can talk. No, it's the government, the federal government. They're not going to change. So basically what we did is we had to bring somebody on that is helping us to have those 3 operating units balance. And that's also part of our initiative so that we don't go over budget and that we do not have lines at the end of the year that have to be washed into the general fund. So when we talk about that, that consulting line is really to have somebody come in on a regular basis. We're still doing a lot of work, but we only have one finance person in-house. All the staff keep their time, but that's a need for us to make sure that we are not going over budget in our general fund, and that when we report to the feds, that everything balances.
All right. So following up on that, is there any one other breakout on that? So is there anything regarding departments? Well, I think we touched on already, but an update regarding the home ownership programs.
Well, I think in this budget in 2022, we have a consultant line that will be able to get some help on that. I do have someone in the department that has previously and has also taken some training this year, so that when we're doing anything that has federal funds in it, I mean, right now the federal funds, it's kind of obnoxious, but they're requiring under new regs that we actually do underwriting that the bank does. So when you talk about some of those pieces, when we're supporting with homeownership with federal funds, we're trying to be as clever as possible. We're not giving money directly to the buyer, so that it relieves us from some of that requirements. But again, it's we have to first be, we're using federal money. It's not our money. We have to be first and foremost consistent with the federal regulations, so that we don't create liability for the city to have to pay it back.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up, Director Weir. Turning to question 11 now. This is the planned use of the $200,000 budget for disposition costs.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. We had a discussion after the budget had been submitted that some of these descriptive lines probably could be a little bit better than they are. But when we talk about it, I mean, we have demolitions, you have to take the asbestos out. I mean, securing the property. This is, in response to our constituents, so that this line is also one that we could be able to respond in a specific way. When we talk about disposition costs, we were lucky this year we didn't have a lot of snow, but you have a snowy winter, and that number of cleaning the sidewalks off can go get ahead of you real quick. And as far as from my professional perspective, you can't go out and ticket somebody that's not shoveling their sidewalk if you're not doing it yourself. So this really basically gives us money to use on properties that come in and out of our inventory. And there are occasionally situations where we have miscellaneous projects where, the one I had last week, where someone had a roof done and the roofer that was responsible for it was not honoring their warranty. They had other issues. So what we ended up doing is we ended up going out, estimating what it would cost to fix the roof. But then we also have to work with our community partners to see if we might be able to get them a grant to through the Ingleside program to repair the inside of their house. They're elderly, single female head of household that it worked her whole life to own her own home. She wants to give it to her kids. So that's a very real request that comes across line. And for us to be able to be responsive, we have to have some non-federal funds.
And I understand that I believe there's no cost that you recoup from this.
No, as far as the federal funds now, there are loans that have been given over time out of the federal funds, and we do have income, program income from those on a semi-regular basis. But one of the things we also look at is when we talk about, especially for me, if you talk about somebody that's taken out a loan in 1982 for $5,000 or $6,000, and they're selling their house and it's worth the exact same it was in 1982. There's sometimes people ask us for relief, and we do an analysis on what the property is worth and what the loan was. And a lot of times this is when it's an estate and the children have no idea that this mortgage was on it. So there is program income, but I need the council to know that there is an analysis that we do, and there are areas where it's negotiated. So say, for instance, somebody has taken out a loan for $10,000 in the 90s. We might settle for, $3,000 if it's being sold today, given what it's being sold for and what other debts.
I mean, is there an analysis to look at? Again, this is going into, I think, a further discussion, but is there analysis on what an increase to vacant property fees and assessments could possibly add into this program?
Well, I don't want to be a non-team player, but more money gets more done. And, I'm not really caring where it comes from per se, but, again, it's a situation. If you have a vacant property fee, I know that there are situations where that's negotiated too, because of some, my background with the real estate community. They would also tell you that vacant property fees are more onerous than anything else because somebody's inheriting them, and and then you try to explain to them, no, they're not inheriting them. There is a window. If somebody buys a property that's vacant, there's a window, and there's a process that they can get those cleared, and so forth and so on. But it just adds to the list of things why not to do business in the city of Wilmington. So I would question, when you talk about vacant property fees, why aren't they negotiated off?
Okay, and that's that more of a finance department question?
I would think so. Thank you.
All right. I believe Councilwoman Oliver, are you still there?
Yes, Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to really make a statement. I hear Bob getting a little beat up tonight, but I just have to give credit that you are doing an outstanding job in real estate and housing. And thank you for helping my seniors out who needed some help. And I'm glad you was there to help them with the facade program. So I just want to say from me, from the 3rd District to Bob Weir in real estate and housing, we love you. 3rd District loves you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman.
Council Member Cabrera, question.
Here I am. Yes, I just wanted to invite Director Weir to the June committee meeting if he would like to come and just kind of go over the workings and the operations of the department. And we had some really thoughtful questions brought up this evening during the budget hearing that our council members may want to ask at that time, and questions that we can get, and just, really get a good idea of the operations, the do's, the don'ts, everything that the department does. And that way we can have a real good, thoughtful discussion leading into the next budget year, the things that we'd like to see, and improvements, and just, even talking about those empty lots, explaining how that worked. That was very helpful because these are things that have come up in our meetings. So you are welcome if your agenda permits it.
I would love to.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I also want to mention that I am applying for that Live Where You Work as I go to buy my property in June. So council office will be represented there. I'm very thankful that opportunity exists for the workers.
Right on.
All right, well, that was a good plug. I certainly appreciate it, as I can personally say, back when I was in the law department, I actually used the program myself. So it is a program that I think not enough employees use. So I appreciate the work real estate and housing does. Going forward, I believe if there's no more questions on this, we can move to question 12. Can you discuss the $1 million budgeted for capital funds relating to disposition, acquisition, and rehabbing vacant properties?
Well, right now, the control that the city has, and I say the city and our partners, is coming from sheriff's sale. And the reality of it is that there's plenty of properties that either link to those, are strategic properties. I mean, I think everyone can relate to driving down the street and seeing a corner property that's, vacant or in really bad shape. It's got a high visibility. It affects 4 streets, so forth and so on. So when we look at the stabilization, we look at picking up property at market value. That doesn't mean paying the highest dollar for it, but it means actively pursuing those properties so that there can be some sort of impact. I mean, when you talk about, say, for instance, a block and you got 2 or 3 that are under construction, there's one that's a stinker and they pay their taxes. Do we have the opportunity to go and say, we'd like to purchase your property and negotiate that? Right now, we don't have any money to do that. So this really represents some acquisition in the fair market so that we can take some high visibility because after all, at least in my opinion, that this is a story you're trying to tell, that the neighborhoods are changing, the neighborhoods are having investment in them, and this would represent informed professional knowledge and picking up properties. I think the same thing goes for some of the vacants. We have vacant properties that people pay their taxes and their fees, yet they're still vacant. And what's the answer to that? Well, I think part of the answer is approaching those owners and in a fair market negotiation, purchase those properties. So that represents some of that. And when we talk about when we're working in specific areas, very strategic acquisition there. when we talk about the stabilization, the renovation, that all goes hand in hand. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know of any partner that I've ever talked to when I was talking as a representative of the city that they didn't say, what are you putting in? So this capital, I think Tammy Washington looked at me because I think I put in in my original budget, I put in 10 million. And she looked at me, she said something like, we only go every 2 years and 20 million is the limit. So I think you need to adjust that. So yeah, I think that we could use more money. I think this is enough that we could get something done with it. It's not so little that it will disappear. And I think that it needs to be part of the overall strategy that we're, cleaning the streets, we're taking the vacants and either stabilizing them or clearing them. We're helping the folks that are owners, and then can we help them through facade or for home ownership? That's the kind of answer I would give you. And this really represents acquisition in the fair market.
All right, and as a follow-up to that, Director, and I guess you don't have a crystal ball, but for now, sheriff sales are still for the foreseen future on hold. So is it mostly the city and land bank are primarily dealing with existing properties that they have? Is that what you foresee?
Well, the sheriff's sale did kick back in last week. This week. But when you look at what people are buying at sheriff's sale, Mr. Chairman, you cannot believe the prices that people are paying retail at sheriff's sale right now. The market is that hot. And again, it's the same situation. Are those folks actually going to do something with that house? I think that's the next step that we need to really observe closely, because to take a property that's empty and just keep it empty, speculate on it, does not help our neighborhoods. But right now, yes, we're all primarily out of what's in our inventory or what's coming in through sheriff's sale.
Okay, so that's actually, I did not know they had begun. So is that due to state guidelines were lifted, I guess, April 1st?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, exactly. They went 1 month, they suspended the next, and then they're back on in April.
Okay. So if anything, your inventory is going to stay, I guess, consistent, not a huge uptick, I guess, until we're probably out of COVID.
Yeah, and I think the unintended consequence is that we are bidding these properties up. Like, say, for instance, there was a couple properties that we felt that were really keepers in the 9th Ward. Well, they were bid up. We bid them all the way up. Everything was owed to us, and the bid at sheriff's sale went beyond that. So the upside is that the city received everything they had invested to take it to sheriff's sale. The owner of the property got the reserve that was left over, and hopefully there's going to be something done with that property.
Now, do you have I understand that there were sheriff's sale consultants prior to COVID. Is this reinstalled in the budget again in the consultant line?
Not in our department. We're doing what we've been working towards as far as getting better is that we have been working with license and inspection, finance, law, to look at these properties, look at them before they go to sheriff's sale, decide what properties that we're going to bid up to the max, say, for instance, what properties that we look at and we say, really, we don't want to end up with those properties. So in-house, we've gotten our system a lot tighter than it used to be, in my mind. There's nuisance properties added in there too, Mr. Chair, as far as their properties that the public safety throw into the bucket.
Thank you very much, Chair Ware. Now, moving on to number 13, can you discuss the planned use of approximately $3.7 million budget across CDBG Fund grants, Home Investment Partnership Funds, Home Funds, Housing Opportunity Funds, HOPWA, and Emergency Solutions Grants, ESG. And is there a chart that you can share?
Yes, absolutely. I believe it might be 2 slides or it might be 4 slides ahead. There you go. So the process, in January we start, we have submitted to the federal, to HUD, to the officials, a plan that we have a committee that is invited, and they review all the submissions. We advertise that there's money available. We contact any of the organizations that have previously been awarded funds. We have an information session. We have 2 public sessions after that for feedback. We put together what we looked at, what you're looking at here, and I believe it's the next couple slides. But I think that the overarching message that I'd like to share is that we had requests for 4.9 million, and we only awarded 2.7, which just shows the gap that we have. When we look at the youth and families, what you're looking at right now, there's the spread of activities. I don't think there's any one of these activities that is looking for just city funding, so that we are part of the funding for them. When you talk about each one of those organizations put together a very thorough application that we hold them accountable for, because that application then gets put in file, and that's how we report it to HUD. Then HUD asks us, based on the application, what got done. So it's a very technical and robust process. We did not have any new organizations that applied this year. And there was only one organization that applied that was not, the committee decided not to fund. And that was actually the state of Delaware.
Okay. Now, have any of these funds specifically, I'm trying to go through the list as we go, have any of these funds specifically been used for anti-violence initiatives?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that last question.
Any of the funds specifically used for anti-violence initiatives?
The Christiana Cultural Arts has a youth violence prevention program, and not to be coy, but I would argue that when you look at any of these youth programs, that is not technically violence prevention, but I think it supports the notion of the de-escalation of violence with our youth. But there's no, for instance, there's no programs that are connected with any kind of public safety initiatives.
Okay. I believe Council Member Dixon has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because I know I'm looking at some of the numbers and of how much was requested versus how much is actually given recommendation wise. Is there a reason why some of them are so significantly low in their request amount? And then you guys give them justification of why it's at that number versus, because I was just looking, for example, Reach Riverside and Kingswood, for example, asked for 20 for both of those, but only getting 1,000. So I was just wondering, did we give them explanation of why it's such a low number?
Councilwoman, the first answer I'd like to give you is that there is a scalable review. So that, say, for instance, the committee on an individual basis scored each of these applications not only on what they felt was the merit, but also other funding, because we asked what other funding sources are who else you asking? So I would think that part of the panel funding recommendation would be their score of the actual application, and then the consideration of what other funding they were requesting.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to know, because I only saw one that was actually funded at the same amount requested. So I was just wondering. Okay.
Right. And I also would add that, to answer your question, that when we write a letter of award to these organizations, in that letter is also, if you'd like to discuss how you could, put the application in better, if you have questions for us, and then we deal on a one-on-one.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and as we go through this process again, I know another year just kicked off, and I would definitely please, as we go forward, I would like more information shared at the committee level, Director Ware, just so when we're at this process next year, it's a lot more transparency. Now, do you have an idea of just, you may not know the answer, Director, if there's any new recipients that you project to receive funds soon? Any ones that aren't in the prior list?
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, you're right. I don't have an answer. I mean, as far as, when you talk about some of these organizations, they've honed their skills. So when they talk about the services they're delivering, they're pretty darn good. When you talk about some of these startups, they need to have that's part of the scoring of their application. If they're a startup, they don't score as highly. I don't say that they're ostracized, but at the same time, that goes into the overall scoring. We've talked about we have information meetings before the applications need to be turned in, and oftentimes we see folks at those meetings, but we don't see an application from them. So I think that's kind of an indicator that at our information meetings, they're learning that, oh, there's requirements, and maybe we can't meet those requirements, and that's resulting in they're not putting an application in. We don't discourage it, but we are very real because, again, if HUD comes in and says we did an audit and this group did not do what they were supposed to do, we are the ones that are liable. Now, we just added last year into their contract that says if you're found in violation of a HUD requirement, you're going to have to pay it. But that some of these organizations, if they're getting say Lutheran Community Services getting homeless prevention at $100,000, if they're found in violation, they don't have $100,000 sitting in their bank account to pay for it. So the aversion to liability for the city drives us to make sure that the folks that we're giving money to contractually know what they're getting themselves into.
Okay, and okay, just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anyone. Turning to one of the final questions, question 14. This is about, can you discuss your real estate and housing resources and investments for one of your priorities, which is youth programming, which I believe you touched on already, but specifically about housing, counseling, homelessness intervention, and senior housing repair. So those priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as when we talk about all the stabilization efforts, we have some money in place. We have more. We can do more. When we talk about the survey work we've done and the partnerships that we've tried to build on, as a perfect example, tomorrow I'm meeting with the interim director at WHA, and we're going to go over the review of his inventory so that we're on the same page. And there's a list of properties that I'm going to give that director and say to him, these properties, we have high interest in their outcome. So that, they're either located next to a property that we control, they're in a neighborhood that we're planning on working in, they've been longstanding vacant, those type of criteria led us to say to this organization, these are the properties that are really important to us. So when we talk about those priorities, for me, it's about, well, I said it before, but doing what we can with what we have. If we have a windfall from the American Rescue Fund resources, all the better. But that will also increase our administrative needs too. When we talk about the greening efforts, right now, we just missed out. I had been pursuing a pro bono partnership with a environmental company, and I don't think we're going to be chosen for that competition, but that would be something that we're looking for them to come in and do pro bono work in testing the lots. and for safety as far as if we were going to green them or we're going to set them up for growing. When we talk about the senior housing repair, I believe that council did get the list of all our community partners. And basically what happens there is that when someone contacts us and they have needs, we try to match them with the best program for them. Generally speaking, I mean, it's crazy. There's Milford has a program that there happens to be a homeowner on Jefferson Street that they're going to go down and work with the Milford program, and Milford's going to come up and do the rehab on their house. So we're not just looking and locking down the funds that we have, but we're trying to leverage all our community partners. When we talk about, of course, the homelessness prevention, the Hope Center has a big part of that. But currently, right now, we can only pay for services that are rendered to our people. $100,000 in the youth programs, and as far as housing counseling, I think that is a gigantic piece when we talk about helping people prepare, because that's really it's not the will to win, it's the will to prepare, right? The issue locally with the HOPWA funds, that's for the folks with HIV and AIDS, is that in our locale, that disease has really moved from a fatal disease to a chronic disease. And I think that's a nod to the services that are available in our community. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Newcastle County do not accept any HOPWA funds at this point. We actually have an impact area that goes into Cecil County. So, when you talk about some of those funding sources, we can't use them outside of that purview. But right now we're having a tough time using it because a lot of folks that have HIV and AIDS are using other programming dollars and other services because, as I say, their disease has moved from fatal to chronic. So, when we talk about those type of priorities, neighborhood stabilization, you got to start with the people that own their homes. You got to have deferred maintenance needs. You got to look at the bad properties because they're not going to get any better without our intervention. And you got to look at the properties that are vacant that can be stabilized and brought back to be attractive to the marketplace.
Follow up to that, just kind of throwing something out there. I know we're looking at different creative ways to rebuild our neighborhoods. Has the city ever explored micro bonds and mini bonds as a way to raise capital for some of these projects?
I'm not aware of any. I think that our normal bond program has been the backbone of our bond financing. I think that when you talk about those type of projects, they come out of combinations. I'm not aware of any. Say, for instance, I'm not aware of any opportunity zone projects in the city right now. So you think about there's a large swath of our city that is opportunity zone eligible. And where can we help that happen? When you talk about a lot of this stuff, also depends on jobs.
Okay, and that's something I know we have not touched on. Just for the public's information, I understand that the prior opportunity zone funding project window, I guess, closed in 2019, 2020. When did that prior?
I'm sorry, I don't have any comment on that. I'm not sure of the answer.
Okay, all right. Sorry if I'm asking a question. But projects, so programs like that are programs that you're looking into. Kind of, they may sound a little bit left field, but they're new creative ways that we can get investment in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. As far as but the real issue with some of these, the only return really for the investors is on rental. There are some cities that have said, hey, the only thing we're going to do is low income tax credits. And that's a great leverage point, and that's a great bait for investors. But we're also talking about that is also rental, and from my perspective, I think that's part of the answer, because when you talk about all these residential single family homes that have been converted to rentals, they're ripe for, abuse and poor maintenance, versus when you have something like, the Compton, or you have something like the Flats, or you have something like Brother Ronald has done over at St. John's. The maintenance and the finances make so much more sense.
All right, I believe Council Member Gray has a
Thank you,
question.
Mr. Chair. Since we're talking about proposals and programs, I encourage you to consider down payment and settlement help for first-time home buyers in our city. We're a majority minority city with AMI below the county's AMI. And most jurisdictions have a down payment settlement help programs. And I figure that this is one of the first impediments to owning property is not having the down payment. So I would like to know if this is one of the programs or proposals we can add this year to have a down payment and settlement help for first-time home buyers, $3,000, $5,000. This is a question if something like this could be added as a proposal or program going forward, because it is one of the main impediments for people not being able to purchase homes.
Maybe that's something that could be addressed through the rescue funds.
Yes, I think the CDBG funds can be used for that, the home funds. So thank you.
I was talking more about the 55 million that we intend to get.
Oh, either way, but I think it would be a positive thing. It would help. I think it would help move houses in the city and encourage people to come to the city, because I think most jurisdictions do have this type of help for their citizens. Thank you.
All right. This time, Director Ware, if you can move to the organizational chart.
There's been only two changes from last year. The Director of Development, which was previously labeled as the Acquisition Disposition Manager, and then as far as the GIS technician, would be working under that position when we talk about the additional responsibilities that they would have would be, some of the things we talked about tonight. Some of the mapping, some of the story that we need to tell needs to be, we could tell it better. I could use the example of we have a map that we've been working on that outlines all the historic districts and the potential historic districts and the downtown development district and the opportunity zone, so that anyone that is looking to invest in the city can look at that map and say, there's my property, here's what might be available as far as funds, here's what might be available or not available, but here's what might be required as far as if I'm going to renovate, so forth and so on. That's my vision there, is to be able to tell our story better and then be the active participants in it. So that's the only change we really have as far as in this org chart from last year.
I believe you have another slide as well.
Yeah, that's just to actually outline the specific duties of the employees, how it breaks down.
All right. Any questions from members of council right now? Okay. All right. Council member Dixon.
I swear this is my last comment, Chair.
We're here whatever we need.
I just wanted to know, I know Director Ware, at one point we did a 204 contractors program before. Is that program still existing, or have we put that on hold?
Well, it still exists. The challenge that we ran into is that when the land bank was selling a property for $1, the lender could not justify the equity in the property. So what happened is that you had folks that said, I have enough money to rehab the house. I am all ready to do it. I have a contract for $1. And the underwriter said, I can't underwrite this. So that really stumped us. And actually at the same time, COVID kicked in and we lost our consultant. So, I mean, it was a combination of issues, but part of it was that there has to be a decision made by the lender at a very high level to waive the equity requirement to have a 203K work.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Director Ware, for that explanation.
Yeah, we tried at one point to go to them and said, okay, we'll put a $50,000 mortgage on it. And we can subordinate it and we'll be behind you. And they're like, no, that's fake. I was like, well, what's fake about it? Come on. You're telling me you need equity, we'll give you equity.
Right. Yep. Totally understand that.
Yeah. Silly.
Thank you, Chair.
And at this time, I'd like to turn to members of the public for any public comments. All right, this time, I believe first I have Ms. Christian Willauer. Floor is yours,
Yes.
ma'am.
Oh, thank you very much. I'd like to thank council for the opportunity to for airing this and for the great discussion. And I would also like to thank the director, Mr. Weir, for your clear efforts to answer everybody's questions. And a lot of information, very valuable information, has been shared tonight. So I'm very glad I put in the time to be at this hearing. And I guess just following up on that, it sounds like you've done an incredible amount of research and preparation in anticipation of some of the resources that might become available through not just the regular CDBG funds, but also the American Rescue Fund. And it's great to hear about that level of research and the thinking. And I guess my question is in this plan that you're developing, is there a role for the public and a dialogue with, residents who are involved in their civic associations, city council members who have a lot of conversations with residents day to day about housing issues? And so what is the way that we could add some public engagement to the development of the plans around the American Rescue Fund? Just to add understanding at the local level, at the neighborhood level, to the research that you're doing and the resources that you're bringing to answer these questions. And just to expand the partnership from the nonprofit sector and the government sector also to the neighborhood level and the civic engagement infrastructure in the city. And then also, I just wanted to briefly talk about blight. When we talk about vacant houses, of course, they can undermine neighborhoods, but sometimes vacant lots are almost even worse. And I'm, thinking about some vacant lots in the west side, like the vacant lot on 2nd Street between Harrison and Franklin Street, which is like doing more to kind of undermine that neighborhood than I can really think of anything else. And it's it accumulates trash. People use it for, it's clearly part of other activities that are undermining the quality of life in the neighborhood. And I know that the city has made some effort in this, but it's clear that more needs to be done. So again, I think there's opportunities for partnerships with residents, and also in the process of thinking about the plan for what's demolished. I think it's, some of these after effects of demolition could be dealt with proactively through developing strong partnerships up front. So thanks very much for your time and for all your hard work.
You're very welcome.
All right. Are there any other comments from members of the public? Hearing none, I would like to turn it back to members of council.
Thank you, Mr.
All right. And also as a follow-up, just as some questions that have been raised, and again, city council staff will address these questions to Director Ware and try to talk about the process going forward as to what the American Rescue Fund rollout looks like. That's probably a question that you'll see definitely on the Real Estate and Housing Committee agenda. I can't speak for Councilmember Cabrera, but definitely as a council, I believe we're aligned as one council and kind of working with the administration on this process and working to engage the public. Now, I don't know if Councilmember Cabrera, you have just comment on that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I heard my name.
Oh, never mind. That's okay. Just about the process in terms of American Rescue Plan funding and working with the administration so that we're all on one page in terms of how neighborhoods are going to be stabilized. I imagine it's going to be on the agenda soon, right?
Yes, well, one of the things that we are still waiting on is to get the actual determinations of how we can use the funds, but we know that the funds can be used for infrastructure. So one of the things that the mayor did discuss with myself, as well as the president and other members of this council, is that using the recovery funds for neighborhood stabilization, which means we can use those funds now to tear down some of those vacant properties. We can build upon them. We can put monies in a fund, as was mentioned, for property owners to fix their properties, and just to deal with the blight in our neighborhoods. We can actually fund programs that may already exist. It doesn't really want you to start new programs. They want programs that actually exist and function and work. We can fund those programs, such as maybe first-time homeowner funds. We can also make those loans available or grants for people to fix their properties. So there's a lot that can be done with it, but I know that this is a once in a lifetime shot in the arm that Wilmington really needs. And we really got to take this opportunity to stabilize our neighborhoods, because we can all agree when we look around, the neighborhoods that have the highest amounts of crime and incidents are the neighborhoods that have the most blight, because people look at them and just figure that nobody cares. So we have to show that we care. We can't abandon the people that live there. And most importantly, think about the children that live in those neighborhoods, that these are the conditions that they live in. They don't have playgrounds to play. The streets are dirty, littered, and again, crime everywhere. We recently just saw what happened yesterday, right in one of our neighborhoods on the east side, where 3 women got shot. So if we start stabilizing our neighborhoods, we're really going to get to one of the core issues when it comes to dealing with crime in our city. And we're going to discuss this further in the committee meetings, which I invite you to attend on the 3rd Thursday of the month.
All right. I appreciate it. Council member, thank you so much. And now I believe some of the final questions and comments. I believe Councilwoman Oliver, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like to say I think you're doing a great job also. But I really appreciate the Homes campaign. I think they do a great job. But I think since y'all work throughout the state, I think we get a bad rap because I'm on Newcastle County meetings and I don't see y'all coming at them. And Matt Myers has plenty of money. As a matter of fact, the 2 of the meetings, they were talking about money that's trying to bring to the city of Wilmington, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the same energy y'all bring here, which is good energy, I think it's only fair to also attend Newcastle County meetings and bring that same energy, because I think I know that we're not the only entity that works with the home campaign. I mean, at least I don't think so, since y'all work throughout the state. So I just wanted to make that statement. I think y'all do some good work, but I would like to see that energy throughout the whole Newcastle County, because when Matt Myers had that money, and I was on several of the meetings, I didn't hear the Homes campaign even inquiring about any money, unless I missed the meeting. So I think y'all should use that same energy for Newcastle County, but keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right. Council Member McCoy.
Thank you, Chair. I actually just wanted to thank Director Weir. I did leave another comment because during the time frame that we had our exchange, I didn't get a chance to respond to his comment, but just wanted to thank him, and also all of the information I've received as of recent with some of the issues that are going on in the communities here within the 6th District. So you're really, I know you're really trying to make certain that we have an answer. That's the biggest thing. We all sit in these meetings and people kind of like give us spin, but if we can just get answers, that will definitely make certain that we help our community. So I thank you for trying to get those answers.
Very welcome. Thank you
very much. And Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Mr. Weir for all the research he's doing, considering the amount of money he will be receiving. So I thank you for that. And I appreciate receiving the information on the county's CDBG contribution to our jurisdiction. I know, in fact, that they have contributed $125,000 to Riverside and $300,000 to the senior center at Concord and Market Street using the Code of Home Funds. And to piggyback on what Councilwoman Oliver said, we need to be involved in that energy. Last night, they had a meeting where they discussed how they're going to get together and have town meetings and discuss how to use their funds that they're getting. And it is an energy. And I think we need to get involved in it, pick up on it, share with them. I may invite them to the intergovernmental committee to discuss what they're doing. But I agree with Councilwoman Oliver, and I also compliment Mr. Ware. And I guess you will forward the information to Ms. Basnight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Any other final questions or comments from council? All right. Now I'd just like to turn it to Director Ware for any brief closing remarks.
Is this where I can sing?
Yeah, it's your
Sorry. Well, I think I'll finish the way I started, that it's my honor to work for the city of Wilmington citizens. It's my honor to work for the mayor and with city council, and to just repeat a comment I heard, yes, I mean, it's about solutions. There's a lot of right ways of doing things, and if we work together, we'll hit a lot of them, I think. And I appreciate the time you've given me and the respect, which is also very much appreciated. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Director Ware. I unfortunately overlooked Council Member Fields. If you had any last question or comment.
Just really quick, just thank you for your time. Thank you for staying very vigilant in West Center City. And doing what you do throughout the city of Wilmington. But I thank you for taking the time out to explain, even before this budget hearing, you explained to me the monies and different things as a new council member when I had a meeting with you. So even before this meeting, you explained to me about the monies, the budget, and where things went and how things played a big part in real estate and housing and how it affected my district. So again, thank you so much for being very detailed in your budget hearing tonight. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Councilwoman. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you very much, Director Ware. I think you're if you're on The Voice, you will have a top score. It seems like very, very comprehensive. I've gotten a lot of feedback, and it seems like everyone really appreciate it. So you set the bar high for the rest of the department heads. I think the rest of this process. Thank you. And again, I would like to thank OMB, of course, all the department heads who participated in today's process, WITN, and especially our council staff and members of the public who have been engaged and have asked questions and have been involved. The next budget hearings are right around the corner on Monday, April 19th. It's the Mayor's Economic Development Office at 4:30 p.m., followed by Parks and Recreation Department at 6:15 p.m. Please, again, stay tuned to WITN Channel 22 to watch the meeting. You can also watch online WITN22.org or on Facebook. And we have a brand new budget website, which is at wilmdebudget.org. where you can view the budget, look at where it is in the process, and also submit questions as well. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Well, with that, we'll see everyone on Monday. Well, we have council tomorrow in the evening, but for the budget hearings, we'll see everyone on Monday. Take care.
Good night.